In the history of Taiwan's 1947 uprising, one man's story is at the center of a huge debate: Thomas Tang. Was he a rebel leading an armed insurrection? Or was he a hero who stepped up when his city was falling apart? Today, we're going to open up the case file, fact-check the history, and see if we can find the truth. And this is really the core of it, isn't it? For years, the official story was pretty clear. He was a dangerous rebel, but a completely different story has come to light, one of a man of incredible courage. So, which one is it? Well, let's follow the evidence and find out. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at the accusation and putting it into historical context. Then, we'll dive into this supposed student rebellion, take a hard look at the so-called trial he got, and uncover an amazing act of sacrifice. Let's see what the facts really tell us. To really get what happened to Thomas Tang, you have to picture what was going on in his city, Tainan, back in March of 1947. I mean, this was a city that was right on the edge of complete and utter collapse. So the central government had basically lost its grip. Local order was just falling apart. You had police and soldiers literally abandoning their posts, fleeing the city. This created an incredibly dangerous power vacuum. The city desperately needed someone to step in before everything descended into total chaos. And right here, this is a fact that changes the entire story. Thomas Tang didn't just decide to take over. He was officially appointed. The Tainan City Council formally asked him to lead the Public Order Division of a Citizens Committee to try and restore some stability. You see, this wasn't some rogue action. It was an official request. And this brings up a really fundamental question, right? When the government fails, when the state can't protect its people, is it a crime for citizens to step up and organize to keep the peace? Or is it actually their civic responsibility? The historical record really seems to point to Tang fulfilling a duty to a city that had been left defenseless. All right, now let's tackle the most serious accusation of all, the claim that Tang got students to form an armed rebellion. This was the charge that was ultimately used to justify his execution. But what do the facts actually say? Well, first-hand accounts from the students who were actually there paint a very, very different picture. One student made it clear that their mission wasn't to overthrow the police. It was to assist the few local Taiwanese officers who hadn't run away. They were filling a void, not staging a coup. So what about the weapons they supposedly seized? When you look at the records, you see a clear official process. The chief of police signed off on it. The city government authorized it. The entire goal was to maintain public order. And here's the kicker. When the army finally showed up, the students voluntarily handed every single weapon back. That really doesn't sound like a rebellion, does it? Now this might be the most powerful piece of evidence against the whole rebellion story. If these students were really part of a dangerous insurrection, what do you think happened to them? Well, 24 of them went through something called a self-renewal process. You know what that involved? They gave a statement, signed a form, and were sent home. No prison, no execution. Does that sound like the punishment for high treason to you?
So the students were basically pardoned, but Thomas Tang, he faced a completely different fate. Let's look at the incredibly fast and brutal series of events after his arrest, and you can hardly call it a trial.
Just look at this timeline. It's chilling. He was arrested on March 11th. He was tortured so badly overnight that his ribs were broken, and by March 13th, he was executed. 3 days. That's it. This wasn't justice. It was a summary execution, plain and simple. There was no due process here. And the piece of paper they used to justify it all? It was a complete and total sham. It didn't have a judge's name, it didn't have a case number, it didn't even have a date. Legally speaking, it was a worthless document. It was just paperwork designed to give the thinnest possible cover for an extrajudicial killing.
But there's another piece of the story that is absolutely crucial, something that happened during that horrific night of torture. It's the very reason why, for so many people, Thomas Tang is remembered not as a rebel, but as a true hero.
During that interrogation, his torturers demanded one thing above all else: a list. The list of names of all the students and citizens who had helped maintain order. If he had given up that list, it's estimated that well over 100 people would have likely met the exact same fate as him. But he refused. Thomas Tang knew exactly what would happen if he handed over those names. And so, he destroyed the list. He chose to endure the torture and face certain death in order to protect the people in his community. It was just an unbelievable act of defiance and self-sacrifice. And the story gets even more tragic from here. Because even though Thomas Tang was dead and gone, the legal system, in a really bizarre twist of fate, eventually caught up to the truth.
I mean, just look at this contrast. On March 13th, he was executed as a rebel, but just a few days later, a new directive came down that all of these 228 instinct cases had to be properly reviewed by the High Court. And what did the court find? That Thomas Tang was innocent. The state itself legally cleared his name, but only after it had already killed him.
So today, that posthumous verdict, that declaration of innocence, has become the foundation for officially reclaiming his legacy and finally correcting the historical record. And this isn't just some academic debate. The city of Tainan now officially marks the anniversary of his death, March 13th, as Justice and Courage Memorial Day. There are special exhibitions about his life and his era, and the consensus among historians is crystal clear. He was a defender of human rights and a victim of state violence, not some kind of rebel leader.
This quote about his memorial statue just sums it up so perfectly. Remembering Thomas Tang isn't about celebrating rebellion. It's about remembering that standing up for what's right, for justice, can come at the ultimate price. And it's a reminder that we have to be vigilant against the systems that allow such a terrible injustice to happen.
Which, of course, leaves us with this one final massive question. The case of Thomas Tang is such a stark reminder of what happens when the rule of law completely breaks down. It forces all of us to ask, what protections, what guardrails does a society need to build to make absolutely sure that a state can never, ever again execute an innocent person?